facing Boston's civic design challenges through human-centered design. We are a team of undergrad Northeastern students who all study design. Brandon, I don't know if you want to talk about Scout and what we do. Yeah, we can go with that.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Brandon. I'm the executive director of Scout. And
I'm the labs director of Scout.
And hi, I'm Chloe. I'm the labs design lead.
Yeah, so I'm just going to start the presentation with a little bit of background and just general high-level overview of what Scout is. So Scout is Northeastern University's student-led design organization. And so I guess I'll just kind of dive into what each of our teams do and kind of explain what that means. But we have 7 teams on Scout. These are them. I will go deeper into them in a second, but it's just the list of our teams. Noah and I are both on the management team. As he said, he's the labs director. But next slide. This is our org chart for the semester. So we have 95 members, undergraduate members in Scout right now. So we've gotten really big over the last year. And there's a lot of members, so there's a lot of things that we do. And yeah, we're really excited to just like kind of show off a little bit of what Scout does and talk more about labs and the project that we've been working on this year. So I'm just going to quickly go into kind of what each team on Scout does. First, we have Studio. Studio is our largest team in Scout. We actually have 6 teams on Studio this semester, but every semester we take on 5 student-led ventures from IDEA, which is Northeastern's like venture incubator in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Mosaic is what it's called. So we work with these clients to do branding, web design, mobile UX design, kind of whatever the client needs. We talk with that client and we kind of figure out the scope of the project at the beginning of the semester. And then we meet with our clients, our teams meet with our clients weekly to go through an entire design process. And then whatever they need, whether it's packaging design or a website or a mobile application, we also then build out that app or website or that product line. And I just have some examples of some projects that we worked on. These are 2 projects from last semester. Stow is a portable scooter, and we did a website for that project, and we also did a bunch of product photography for the scooter. And then on the right we have Cashflow. Cashflow is a mobile application that allows users to turn cash into digital currency that can be used at any point of sale. And so we created a mobile application for that venture. And those are both projects from last semester. And then this is Better Than Belts. It's a suspender brand. And we worked on creating an e-commerce site for them. This is from like 3 years ago or 2 years ago. I think this was during the first semester that we went into our COVID semester. So we did a full brand and web design for this company as well. And really quickly, the 5 teams that Studio works with this semester, we have Cloven, which is Cloven is a custom board game that is made with tiles that can be reconfigured to create a bunch of different games. And then we have Ornami, which is a woman-owned sustainable beauty product care line. Envision, which is a venture incubator that provides mentorship to young startups. Blackit, which is an e-commerce site that connects buyers to local Black-owned businesses. And then we have a team that's working on a more internal project called Scout Presents, which I'll talk a little bit more later. But Scout Presents is a project that we're working on. We're making a site that features creatives at Northeastern and in the greater, I guess, like Northeastern creative community outside of Scout. And then we also have a team that's working on creating an accessibility guide for future teams and also for designers at Northeastern, designers and developers to create projects that are more accessible in a sustainable way. And then we have our conference team. So every year, Scout puts on our annual Interventions Conference. We have a design team, a marketing team. We also have a development team that creates our website every year. And we also have now a UX team that focuses largely on day of experience design. And so this year's conference happened 2 weekends ago. The theme was Amplify, so we were focusing on highlighting traditionally marginalized voices in the design community. And so if you go to the next slide, this is some of the branding that we created for this conference. Our conference team started off, it was, I guess like 3 years ago, it was a team of 7, and now it's a team of like 25. So this team has gotten really big. And this was our first conference that we held in person in the last 2 years. So it was really, really exciting. These are some of the speakers that came to talk at our conference this year. And then I think there's another slide. Yeah, these are some screenshots from our website that our team created, which is, it's really awesome. There's a lot of dynamic animations and hover designs going on the site. It's really awesome. The branding is so cool. The team really put a lot of effort into this, and the conference was a huge success. We sold out all of our tickets, and we held it here on campus in our interdisciplinary science and engineering complex. So it was really awesome to see everybody come to our first in-person conference in the last 2 years. So that was really cool. We also have our production team, which focuses more on videography, photography, motion graphics, any other kind of like assorted multimedia projects. They work kind of in tandem with our studio teams, working with our clients, and they also have more internal individual projects as well. The big one being Scout Presents, like I talked about before. I'll get into that in a second, but the next slide. This is an example of a shoot that our production team did with Rooted Living, which is another student venture on campus. It's a sustainable granola company. So we did a whole photo product shoot for this granola brand and did a bunch of animation and product photography to go in their packaging. So that was really fun. That was last year. And then this is also so the Scout Presents I was talking about before is our project that we're going to create. We're creating a website to feature student creatives at Northeastern. And so this is just a little intro animation that we made for our first episode of our this podcast. So our production team did this animation. They did a photo shoot with this guy. He's a singer, and he talks about his creative process. And there's a whole video that we made featuring him and his work. So that's just the little animation that they made for that. But more to come on that one day soon. And then we have our marketing and events team. They handle our bi-weekly speakers series. So every other week we have a speaker from the Boston area come and talk about various topics in design. And we also create collateral, posters, internet, social media collateral that goes out to market these events. And we also have photographers. We have a blog post on Medium, as well as a weekly newsletter called the Weekly Dose of Design that we send out to our mailing list every week. And on the next slide, these are some past events that we've held, different speakers. The poster on the right is actually for our event coming up on Thursday. Here on campus, we're having Liz Harris from Meta come and talk about her experience as a product designer at Facebook/Meta and how internet connectivity accessibility affects her working process with individuals from around the world. So that's pretty cool. And then we also have our operations team, which is our newest team that we created in the last year. Our operations team is much more behind the scenes. They handle a lot of the internal day-to-day operations for Scout. They are there largely to be a bridge between the management team and the rest of the studio. We organize internal programming. We have members that focus on just creating community events, fostering healthy relationships within the studio. We have an HR team now and a recruitment manager. And it's really just to make sure that there is a sustainable team that can help make sure that Scout continues to be a productive working environment for students. Just an example of a community building activity that the operations team is working on. We're having a Scout prom this weekend, and so we've been encouraging students to prom pose to other members of the studio. It's just been a little fun way for our members who are, they're working really hard and they're spending a lot of time together working on these projects, but reminding them that there is always time to just have fun and enjoy each other's company. And yeah, just a little fun little thing that we started this semester. So, and then finally we have labs, and I will let Noah and Chloe talk more about labs in a second, but there's a high-level introduction to what labs does. Our labs team works with the Boston Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics, or MONUM for short, and they work on creating design solutions to government infrastructure problems in Boston. And so this year they're working with the Boston Summer Eats program, and I will let them take it from here.
Sure, thank you, Brandon. The slide, what's going on? Okay. So yeah, Scout Labs, a deeper dive. So I guess I can start out by talking a little bit about the history of Labs' foundation. So I believe we were in our 6th year of having Scout Labs, and when Labs was initially created, there was a student who was a member of Scout who wanted to utilize design thinking, design research, just sort of human-centered design processes to benefit his community. And so he created the Labs team, and he was really passionate about food insecurity and food deserts. But when he individually decided to go and independently research food deserts for his year-long project, he found that food deserts were not as big of an issue in Boston as he thought that they were. And so from that point forward, it was kind of clear that there needed to be someone to sort of direct this community-focused design rather than just picking an issue that the students thought was necessary to address. So then Labs began working with nonprofit organizations, but that sort of turned out to be very similar to the Scout Studio process, except for nonprofits, which wasn't really the purpose of Labs, to like brand organizations. It was more to address issues head on and sort of come up with solutions using design thinking. And then this is now, I believe, our 3rd year working with MONUM, or the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics. And I can talk a little bit more about them and what they do. So MONUM functions as an office within the Boston city government, and they use design thinking, design skills, design research to address a whole host of issues. They have experts on a wide variety of topics. Some of them are listed here. So the organization of our streets, how housing is set up, making spaces more accessible for people, changing the processes by which people register for the Boston Public School System was a big project they worked on. Play, civic research, there are really a whole host of topics that they have used design skills to address, and they function sort of as a partner for us. So in the past, how MONUM and Labs have operated in partnership is MONUM has these graduate fellows who initiate these projects over the summer, and then they sort of present Labs with a list of these projects to partner on going forward. So Labs and MONUM work pretty closely together to work on these sort of issues and challenges. It's less of a client relationship and more of a partnership, which differentiates it from Studio. And it also focuses more on addressing issues rather than sort of like, it's more designing the experience than the visual, is how I would put it. So human-centered design is a term that we throw around a lot. I think a lot of people probably have an idea of what it means. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but just the general idea is designing things for people to use, and not from just sort of an idea that you had that you think would be cool, is the easiest way to explain it. And Labs has a process established for our sort of human-centered design approach. So it begins, sorry. Begins with the empathize stage. In this stage, we really try to figure out, with whatever broader issue we're focusing on or whatever program we're working with in the city, to figure out who all the relevant stakeholders are and sort of learn from them how whatever issue it is that we're addressing affects them. We see what solutions have come before, and go to those people to learn more about how they've addressed these issues in the past. And we research sort of existing knowledge on these issues and sort of try and get a feel for what is actually going on in Boston. And the idea is just to start really broad with it so that we can have like a good foundational base to leap off of when we get into our project. So once we've conducted a wide, and cast a wide net in our research, we sort of try and find one smaller problem within that net to address more specifically. So we analyze all of our research and synthesize it into a problem statement that we as undergrads are capable of sort of working on and resolving with the support of Monum. And then once we have our problem statement, we get into the ideation phase, which involves a lot of brainstorming, and we try to encourage free thinking, which means, although we're undergrads and there's a very limited capacity to what we can actually accomplish, we sort of try to not discourage any ideas from the beginning, because even in more complex ideas that may be too difficult for us to actually, execute, there are often good little kernels of concepts that we can then take and turn into something actually doable for our team. And then we sort of narrow in. We try and get as many solutions as possible. And then we get to the prototyping stage, where once we found our final concept, our final solution to address whatever issue it is that we're addressing, we do a lot of rapid prototypes. We try to have everyone on the team sort of come up with their own prototype and just take the best of each of those projects and turn them into a higher fidelity prototype that we can then test. And when we test, we sort of try and work with the community and the stakeholders who we have spoken with and engaged with in the beginning stages of our project and figure out if this is something that actually works for them, if it's functional, if it helps to resolve their issue. And we just do that and refine it until we've completed our project. And then here's just sort of a list of methods and tools that we use in each phase. So literature review, that's when we, cast our initial net of learning about this topic in depth. Interviews with relevant stakeholders, that's how we really, figure out what these issues are by hearing from the people who they actually affect. Then once we've conducted those interviews, we sort of try and start with empathy maps, which we'll get into a bit more later with our current project, where we kind of try to put ourselves in the headspace of these people and figure out what is going on with them when this issue is affecting them. Then we compile that into a larger stakeholder map where we try and sort of map out how the different stakeholders may interact with each other in this system, and just get a visual on it. Then we create user personas for people who are potentially affected by the issue. From there, when we ideate, we create these journey maps where we try and synthesize everything into an experience that someone might have, and map that experience out. And then we can work back from there once we've figured out that experience and see, okay, here's the experience that exists now. Let's see what we want that experience to look like and map that out and work backwards to see how we can make that experience happen. Some other tools that we use during ideation are how might we statements. So that's just think of as many statements as you can as to how might we address so-and-so, essentially. And so we try and figure out, okay, here are all of these issues. How might we do something about that? Affinity maps, we sort of that's essentially just throwing all of our ideas out there and then sort of clustering them into groups so we can kind of pull out, okay, here are things that keep showing up a lot in our ideation. How can we take the most important aspect of each of these things and put them together? Co-creation is when we work with stakeholders to figure out the solution. Stories similar to the journey mapping exercise, and then just general technical tools we use are Miro, which is a whiteboarding tool, Figma, which is a prototyping tool, and Adobe. I think we know what these are. So now to get into our project from this past year, from the fall of 2021 to now the spring of 2022, we've been working with the Boston Summer Eats program, which is a program that aims to address youth food insecurity during the summer when public school free meals are not accessible anymore. Here is our team. We have a lot of people working on this. As you can see, there are some people who have been here the whole year with us, and there are others who only have been here one semester. For those of you who don't know about Northeastern University, a lot of students come and go from campus semester to semester because we have internships alternating with classes a lot, so it gets a little dicey when you're trying to work on a year-long research project. But yeah, Boston Summer Eats again. provides free meals for children 3 to 18 in the summer at select meal sites. The way these meal sites are selected is essentially community organizations, schools, some summer camps will apply for grant funding to the city of Boston, and then they will be provided that funding, as well as there are 2 select vendors that then deliver meals to the sites where they then distribute those meals to families and children. And so the design challenge that we were initially presented with by the Office of Food Justice when we were presented this project was, how can we improve participation in the Summer Eats program, increase on-site engagement, while simultaneously reducing the burden on meal sites, which that's a lot to tackle, especially because you would think improving participation and increasing the amount of people engaging in this program while also making it easier for the meal sites to actually like distribute these meals, those things kind of conflict a little bit. So there's a lot to tackle there. Some other challenges, the primary stakeholders in this program who benefit from it the most are children. And when we were going to Northeastern's Institutional Review Board to sort of present this project to them and get approval, they said, do not talk to children. They're very adamant. There's just a lot of liability involved when speaking with kids and interviewing kids, and we are not experienced researchers. Again, we are undergrads. So that was a big no-no from the jump. So we had to sort of work around that. Also, this program operates in the summer, which means we can't actually observe any meal sites that are active, which sort of prevents us from really seeing in detail how this program functions. And it also means that when we come up with our solution, it will be difficult to sort of see how it actually plays out and works. And, you know, we are here on an academic calendar, so most of our students are going through finals right now. They're not going to be around for the summer. So it's going to sort of fall on the leadership team of Scout Labs to make sure that this, that our solution is put in place and is actually viable. And then also another thing about the Summer Eats program is that it's a no questions asked program, meaning you don't have to sign up. You don't have to really give them any information about yourself. You just go to the site, and if you are a child of 3 to 18 or you're a parent with your child, they give you the meal. This is just to make sure that no one feels uncomfortable giving information away. They also don't want to have to sort of, if you're, it's mainly, I think, for undocumented people, so that they don't have their information taken and they don't get into trouble. The city does not want to have to report those people who are just looking for a meal to feed their kids. But because of that, there is no data, or very limited data, I should say, as to how many meals are distributed, where they're being distributed, and there's no information at all about what these people like about the program or dislike about the program that's been recorded. We can't really go into specifics on like what foods they might like, you know, any like data beyond just like numbers of like this many meals were distributed in this month did not exist for us. Here were some of the people who operate with Summer Eats who supported us. So Alicia Manandar was from the Office of Food Justice. She was our main point of contact for the Summer Eats program. She had the most knowledge on the program and really helped us get connected with stakeholders who were involved. Sabrina is from Monum, so she spent a lot of time brainstorming with us and just working on this project with us. And then Karibe from the YMCA. So as we'll get into later, the YMCA is a key player in the Summer Eats program. Karibe handles a lot of logistics in terms of like getting meal sites signed up and how, like, connecting them with the vendors who provide the food to them. So he was able to provide us with a lot of contacts from the meal sites who we could speak about the program with. Now that I've set the stage for our research project, I'll throw it over to Chloe, who can discuss the specifics.
Yeah, so just jumping into what our early exploration of this project looked like. As Noah mentioned, we had very limited data about the program, and we also had this question, how can we improve participation? So part of the reason that we spent so much time in this exploration phase is because we wanted to improve participation, but we had virtually no way to actually measure what the participation even currently was. So we kind of spent a lot of time exploring, okay, what information do we have? Is it usable? Like, what does it tell us? And then from that, what's missing? So this was an early chart that we did of just the number of meal sites by neighborhood. So that was one piece of data that we did have, was just what are the meal sites and where are they? So mapping that out was helpful just in terms of getting a picture in our heads about kind of where this program is really functioning and happening. And then this is an alluvial diagram of those neighborhoods by population as well as the meal site organization. So we were really just trying to add in whatever data we could about the program to get that better understanding of it. So this was the meal site data combined with Boston population data. So you can see there were kind of a couple neighborhoods that really stood out, as well as a couple organizations. Community-based organizations were the kind of largest one, and then Boston Public Schools and the YMCA were also, they run a lot of the sites. So in our brainstorming phase, we tried to really break down what elements of the program we could explore further when thinking about our research and how to improve this program, and even how to frame our thinking around it, because the more we looked into the data and the information and how we could kind of measure that and use that, the more it became clear that we really had no way to know if we were improving participation. As Noah also mentioned, we weren't going to be there to observe it in the summer, so we were very much reliant on what structures they had in place for kind of measuring the outcome. I believe they have put in place a new data collection system that is supposed to be launching this summer, so that is exciting. But unfortunately, it wasn't very useful for us this year. So in trying to figure this out, this was a visual overview that we made last semester towards the end. So we kind of mapped out both the program management side, which you can see in the dark blue color, and then the participant side, which is in orange. And then we were really trying to think about what are the specific kind of things that are going on and where do they overlap between the participants and the program management. And what we kind of discovered was we could figure out a lot more about the program management side of things, just because the participants themselves were minors. So if you flip through this, it shows we're kind of highlighting these areas of connection and communication going through. So in order to kind of further understand these structures, we really needed to take a deeper dive into the people involved in the program on both sides, participant and meal providers, and thinking about where those main points of interaction are happening. So if you go to this slide, so this was a big brainstorming session that we had just to map out all of these stakeholders and all of the people involved in this program. And in the yellow post-its, you can see where we started thinking about where the points of communication between all of these different groups is happening. And then this is that same information just kind of synthesized into a chart. So you can see there's sort of these 4 different categories of funding, programming, sites, and food. Along the top, you can see communication, like which are communicating with each other and which maybe aren't. And yeah, so that really helped us get an overview of what was going on. And it was also based partially off of some user interviews that we had done. So I think Noah is going to talk a little bit more in depth about what those looked like and how that informed our research.
Yeah, so just going more in depth into the research that went into creating that stakeholder map. So we sort of tried to start out by doing a media review more, I guess you could call it a literature review. We kind of tried to take a broader approach with it and include like any information we could find about food insecurity in Boston outside of just like scholarly research papers. And so that sort of helped us gain a broader understanding of how food insecurity affects people in Boston. And then a lot of the interviews that we conducted were more with the meal site staff, people who work at these larger community centers, to sort of see, okay, first of all, what issues have you had running your meal site, as in sort of that initial like, burden on meal sites that we spoke about in the beginning. What has made things difficult for you? What do you think the people who come to your meal site like about the program? What do you think they don't like? How do you think they find out about the program initially? What do you think keeps them coming back to the program? How do they engage when they're on site? Have you noticed if something has sort of created a change in the amount of people attending the program? And sort of that informed the rest of our project down the line. So after conducting these interviews, we sort of created these empathy maps, which I spoke about earlier. So here we're trying to figure out what these people think, say, feel, and do when they are operating these meal sites. And this is just to sort of get into their head and think, okay, what would make things easier to operate this program? And yeah, here's another example of a empathy map. These were created by our design strategists. And yeah, that was sort of our first sort of visual mapping that we did to get to the stakeholder map. And after we synthesized all of this information into these visual maps, we sort of started to think, okay, what are the main problems affecting participation in this program, and what are the main challenges for the people who run this program? So from the interviews, we learned that members of the community don't really come to these meal sites for the Boston Summer Eats program. They are people who are already aware of these meal sites as they function as community centers already. And the community centers will sort of draw people in and say, hey, we have this food, but there's not really like brand recognition for Boston Summer Eats. That's not something a lot of people know about. However, we did also hear a lot of the time that when these meal sites received signage or sort of like just any materials that said free food here, more people showed up, which seems pretty simple, but they didn't always get that. And they also said that whenever they received sort of merch that just said Boston Summer Eats and had that branding on it, that had no impact and no one ever wanted it. Like they said they had Boston Summer Eats sunglasses at some point, and that did not, no one took it. So on the participation side of things, sort of, we figured, okay, maybe we're approaching this wrong. Maybe, getting more people involved in the Summer Eats program specifically isn't the way to go. Maybe it's just calling attention to the fact that there's free food at these sites. And then for some of the smaller sites that did not already have like a base of followers or people who attended their programming, for example, there were some farmers markets that the city piloted for this program. For them, I think just like having more access to resources from the city would have helped. I'll get more into the issues from the community center side. They didn't really know who to go to when they were having challenges. Can you guys hear us at all?
Okay, we can hear you now. Yeah,
you hear us now? Okay, so we lost connection on the big screen. Okay. Can you see?
We can see your whole screen.
Yeah? Okay, yeah, okay, we're right there. Sorry, some technical difficulties on our end.
Okay.
I can just talk here and hopefully that works. So I don't know where I left off when we cut out.
It was just like a minute.
Can you still see the screen that's being shared, by the way?
We can see it, but I can see your whole desktop. So
okay, great, fantastic. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know where we cut out necessarily, but I was talking about the issues faced by the meal sites themselves when operating this program. So there's a lack of communication between the individual meal sites and the Office of Food Justice, as well as the YMCA. It gets a little bit confusing because there are a lot of organizations that are sort of in charge of different logistical elements of the program. So when certain things go wrong, they don't necessarily know who to reach out to. And there were a lot of issues with the deliveries, sort of either not coming on time and then they wouldn't know who to reach out to. There were challenges with just, not knowing who to go to with any challenges that they had. There was also a lack of knowledge about the program itself on the side of the meal sites. So one of the major aspects of the program is that these meal sites are supposed to host activities on site so that, the kids can sort of engage with each other. And the concept there is that it will help to sort of build up the community. I think that's the hope. But there were meal sites that had no knowledge of this at all. They just didn't know that that was the thing that they were supposed to be doing. And they didn't know how to access resources to have those activities in place. And then for some of the smaller meal sites, like I was saying, there were some farmers markets that the sort of Office of Food Justice piloted as meal sites. But because these farmers markets aren't pre-existing community centers that have an infrastructure for providing food to people, they didn't really know how to get the word out or how to attract people to their sites. And then, there was also confusion on like who was eligible for the program on their end. So just a lot of confusion in general, I would say. And for all the sites, like what the grant funding was allowed to be used for was a point of confusion as well. So just in general, I think there's like a lack of communication about what this program is. There's a lack of understanding from both sides of what's happening. So we went into our ideation phase and we brainstormed any and all ideas that could address these problem statements. And we just sort of tried to consider what that experience would be like if, these were not issues and try and work backwards from there. So here are some journey maps that we created. So these were synthesized from sort of hypothetical, these were synthesized from our interviews, but we accumulated them into hypothetical people who would be participating in the program. So this is from the sides of parents and children. So in our first one up here, this woman has difficulty accessing food for her kids in the summer. She applies to SNAP benefits, but it's a long approval process, and they just don't really know that this program is in place for them to access food, and they just have a lot of difficulty. They try and maybe go to some shelters, but summer eats does not come into play. This one is a high school student who maybe comes from a low-income household. He sees a poster for summer eats in school, and he sort of scans a QR code on that poster to check out what this program's about, but he has difficulty figuring out like where the meal sites are and what to do or where to go. Eventually he does figure it out, but when he gets to the site, he just sort of eats his food and then leaves because they don't really have any resources on site. And then in our most ideal situation, we have a parent who doesn't know how they're going to provide food to their children. They see a targeted ad on social media for the Summer Eats program and access their website. They see sort of a meal site search tool where they can put in their address and see what meal sites are near them. And then their kids eat at the meal site and they engage in some activities with resources provided by the Office of Food Justice. So that's the most ideal scenario. For community-based organizations, we start with a smaller site. So we have a farmer's market. These are based on sort of real interviews that we did with meal site staff. So the farmer's market, this woman who sort of runs this farmer's market in Boston is approached by the Summer Eats program to pilot test their market as a meal site, but they don't know much about the program. And this woman ends up operating the farmer's market by herself, but then also has to distribute the meals by herself, is unaware of a lot of the stipulations of the program and doesn't know necessarily what they're allowed to do, who they're allowed to give food to. And they don't think that they were really successful in their operations as a meal site, but they want to continue their involvement with the program and see if they can improve anything. Next up, we have a large community center, and they already provide meals to the community, and they apply for additional grant funding through the Summer Eats program. They have the meals delivered, or they apply to have the meals delivered, and they let their followers on social media know that there's free food available. The meals are not delivered on time, and they don't know who to reach out to for support. And then their waste from the previous day is also not picked up by the delivery people who had promised that they would do so. And when the meals do arrive, they are not the food item that was issued on the menu, and some of the people leave because they don't want to eat that food. They want to eat what was advertised, and this person is just sort of generally irritated by this whole process and the lack of communication. And then in our ideal scenario, we have someone who operates a restaurant in Boston. They see an ad for the Summer Eats program and they want to get involved. They check the website for more information, and the responsibilities of operating at a meal site as a meal site are very clearly listed, and the application process is fairly simple. They apply for their grant funding, and the restaurant becomes a registered meal site. Roman uses printout activities that are listed on the website to keep the kids entertained while they're getting their food, and his restaurant becomes a staple of the community as a result. So that's sort of perfect ideal scenario. So we realized in our sort of prototyping phase, where we're getting into narrowing in our solution, that information about this program is not accessible either for members of the community or for the organizations serving the meals. And we tried to think, given what our actual capabilities are as undergraduate students, how can we actually make this information accessible to the community and to these meal sites? So here, Chloe is going to talk about our solution, which I think actually I already have up here. So we can scroll up. If you want to take over here.
Yeah. So we basically prototyped some changes that we're going to be making to the Boston Summer Eats website on the City of Boston. So some of it is pretty similar, but our main change is that for the map, we wanted to create these filters to show distance and to search for specific meals, and also open times, like which days that site is open, so that when people are searching for a site that fits in their schedule or is close to them, it's a little bit easier to do that. If you hover over one of these sites, it'll pop up with some of that information as well as the address. And then if they were to click on that, it will show up also below with a button to click on the menu for that site, and then that'll link over to there. And then we also have this list view, if you prefer to view it that way, that shows the neighborhood, the days, the hours, and the address for the different sites. And we also created some new FAQs for the participant side, just, where can I pick up my meals? Do I need to pay for them? Just questions like that. And then if we go back up, we created this new section specifically for the community organizations. So if we click over here, it's pretty much a resource hub of anything that the meal sites might need, so that all of that information is together. So there's the application, organization, and contact info, so that sites know who to contact when they have an issue, activity suggestions for the sites, outreach materials that they can print out, as well as FAQs specifically geared towards these community-based organizations. And then if we go over to activity suggestions, so we spent a lot of time really focusing on this because activities was something that from the very beginning, the OFJ kind of mentioned that this was something they would really love to try to improve upon for the sites. There are some meal sites that kind of have built-in activities already, just due to the nature of what the site is. For example, there's one that has wrestling, but for newer sites and smaller sites that don't have that, it can be kind of tricky to get the required activity in. So this is a resource for sites like that. Just ideas on in-person activities, types of games to play, materials to get to play the games, a printable kind of activity table that you can search by the type, by the grade level, with an easy download button to go to all of these different activities. And then also online activities that if they really can't do anything in person or don't have the resources yet to do that, maybe their funding hasn't come through from the grant that pays for the activities. This is another one that you can filter by the subject, by the type, and again, by the grade level, and an easy link to just go directly to that activity. And there are also these activity guides that the OFJ had already created. So we wanted to highlight that and make those really easy to find as well when sites are trying to figure out what kinds of activities would be appropriate. So we have a developer who's going to be working with the city to integrate this information onto the actual City of Boston website. So quite exciting.
Go back a bit. We also.
Oh yeah. Do you want to go to the home?
Well, I was going to talk about this for a second.
Okay.
So we're also going to list organization contact info. That page is built up, but it's just not in this prototype yet. So as I said before, there was difficulty and confusion trying to figure out who to contact when problems arose. So we're just going to try and have the contact information for all the people involved in the program, barring obviously like personal info listed on the site, along with a little blurb about what they actually do for the program logistically, and as well as outreach materials for the sites to print out and to post on social media so that they can sort of put it out there that they're having this program hosted, as well as a broader FAQ section for the meal sites themselves so that they can see, okay, what questions do we have about this program? Here are the answers, because that is not something that they have access to as of yet. Right now, if they have any questions, they have to reach out directly to either like the Office of Food Justice or the YMCA, and it's, you know, both of those organizations do have responsibilities outside of operating this program, so it's sometimes difficult for them to get through. So just having the basic questions listed here just makes that whole process a lot easier. Getting back to this. So if we could go back and change anything about the way that we sort of went about this whole process of tackling some REITs, I first wish that we had started a bit more by just tackling food insecurity as a broader issue. I think when we heard increasing participation for this specific program, we got very dialed in on figuring out all of the intricate details of how this program operates. And we did end up going back and doing some research, as I mentioned when I talked about our sort of literature review on food insecurity. But I think, you know, if we'd spent a little bit more time on that, we maybe could have done more to affect the participant side of this, because I feel like we ended up mainly focusing on reducing the burden of those CBOs, which will hopefully end up getting more people to come to the program if it makes it more accessible. But that's sort of a hope. And so, yeah, I think if we had just started more broadly on food insecurity, that would have helped. And then the interviews we did were mainly with meal site staff. We found it somewhat difficult to get in contact with people who actually deal with food insecurity. And, you know, obviously we couldn't get into contact with children. We tried to get into contact with some families, and we had a bit of a budget to pay for people to do these interviews, but ultimately, like, the ratio of people we interviewed ended up being broadly people on this sort of community organization side of things who operate the meal sites, more so than people who actually go to these sites to get food. And they did have a lot of insight into the challenges that people who suffer from food insecurity face and like what they would look for in a program like this. But I still think that's like a secondary source of information. So getting more people who have actually dealt with this issue would have been very useful. And now to get into sort of the future of labs going forward. So exciting news, that prototype that we made will be the first actual live prototype that Labs has ever developed. Previous projects have been prototyped out, but haven't actually gone live on the website. So this is a huge point of progress for us because we're actually getting our work out there, and hopefully it will benefit the Boston community. And going forward, we want to make sure we continue to actually be able to have an impact in the community rather than just sort of doing these hypothetical research projects, which, while they're interesting and expose students to design research and design thinking relatively early in their design studies, you know, I think we can do more to actually impact the community. So to do that, we're going to continue building upon our existing partnerships with Monum and the Center for Design. Monum was very helpful with us this year. However, getting into contact with them, they're all on a 9-to-5 office schedule and we're undergraduate students. So scheduling meetings with them proved to be a bit of a challenge. And we didn't meet with them as much as we would have liked to. So I think, trying to recruit people who are available more frequently to have these meetings with them so that they can actively brainstorm with us on a more frequent basis, I think would be very helpful, as well as the Center for Design, who have so graciously hosted us here. We sort of got into contact with them again this year after a long time discussing a partnership with them. And we are planning on doing sort of a more in-depth design research workshop. I just think having faculty who know more about design research at a higher level and having them on hand to sort of present to our students what goes into design research, some design research methods that they can employ, and that sort of thing at the top of the semester would be very helpful. So that will be something that we are initiating next year.
And then a couple of things that we want to expand upon in the future is definitely the interdisciplinary nature of the team. When Labs was started, that was a pretty core concept to what it was going to be. But we on the team this year were mostly coming from design backgrounds or design combined with something else. So I think really branching out to engineers and computer scientists and people with backgrounds in other kinds of research could be really beneficial to us. And in order to do that, we need to kind of define the roles of the strategists to provide a greater context for them around how, if you aren't a designer and you're coming to, we are a design-based organization, so how can they engage with these human-centered design, research-oriented projects in a really successful way that, they might not necessarily be acting as traditional designers, but learning about how thinking like a designer and what these kind of methods of visual thinking can do for research, I think is really exciting. So we definitely want to focus on finding those people and expanding that interdisciplinary nature of the team. Yeah.
So I think that about wraps us up.